close your eyes. Let your shoulders drop. Let the weight of the day begin to fall away. Tonight, we're going somewhere quiet, somewhere the world doesn't reach, somewhere between sleep and memory. I'm going to tell you stories, not the kind that demand your attention, not the kind with sharp edges or sudden shocks or questions that keep you awake. These are different. These are the kind of stories that let you go. They unfold slowly. They breathe. They don't ask anything of you. You don't need to remember them. You don't need to solve them. You just need to listen. And when you're ready, let them carry you away. Let's begin. History 1. The Last Light in the Window. Part 1. The Window Across the Street. There was a house across the street from where Marcus lived. Nothing remarkable about it. 3 stories, red brick, darkened by time and rain. A small front garden that no one tended anymore, where weeds grew tall and quiet between the stones. 2 windows on the ground floor, 3 on the second, 2 more, smaller, tucked under the eaves on the third. And one of them was always lit. Not brightly, not in a way that hurt to look at, just on. A soft, warm glow, the color of old honey, spilling out through thin curtains that never quite close all the way. It was the window on the second floor, the one on the left, just above the front door. Marcus had noticed it the first night he moved in. He had been unpacking boxes in his own bedroom, the one that faced the street, and when he glanced up to rest his eyes, there it was, the light, steady, unchanging, the only illumination in the entire house. He thought at the time that someone must live there, someone who liked to read at night, perhaps, or someone who worked late, or someone who simply preferred a light left on, the way some people do, as a kind of comfort against the dark. He didn't think much more about it. But the light was there the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. Always the same window, always the same soft glow, always on when the sun went down, always still burning when Marcus finally went to bed hours later. He began to notice other things. The house was empty during the day, completely empty. No cars in the small driveway, no movement behind any of the windows, no mail collected from the box by the front gate. The curtains in every window, including the one with the light, remained perfectly still. No shadows passed behind them, no silhouettes moved from room to room. The garden grew wilder, and every evening, as the daylight faded and the streetlights came on one by one down the block, that single window on the second floor would begin to glow. Not suddenly, not like someone flipping a switch, more like something waking up, like the light had always been there, just beneath the surface, and the dark simply made it visible.
Marcus asked his neighbor about it one Saturday morning. An older man, Mr. Feldman, who had lived on the street for 30 years and knew the quiet history of every house, every family, every small tragedy and departure. "The house across from me," Marcus said, nodding toward it. "The one with the red brick. Does anyone live there?" Mr. Feldman looked at the house for a long moment. "No," he said, finally. "Not for years." "But there's a light," Marcus said. "Every night. Second floor, left window." Mr. Feldman was quiet. He looked at Marcus, then back at the house, then down at the trowel in his hand, turning it over slowly, as if considering whether to say more. "I've seen it," he said, eventually. "Most people have. No one knows why. Someone must be going in there to turn it on." "Maybe," Mr. Feldman said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe that. "Or maybe it's just on." Marcus wanted to ask more, but Mr. Feldman had already turned back to his garden, kneeling down among the small green rows, and the conversation was over.
That night, Marcus watched the window. He sat by his own window, in the dark, with the lights in his room off so he could see more clearly. He watched the house across the street as the evening deepened and the sky went from pale gray to violet to black. The light came on at 8:17 p.m. Or rather, he noticed it at 8:17 p.m. It might have been on earlier, so gradually that he hadn't seen the transition. But at 8:17, he looked up and there it was, the soft amber glow behind the thin curtains, steady, warm, alone in the dark face of the house. He watched for an hour. Nothing moved. No shadows, no flicker, no change in the quality or intensity of the light. Just the steady, even glow, as if the room behind the window were holding its breath, as if it were waiting for something or someone. Marcus went to bed at 11. The light was still on. Part 2. The Patterns. Over the following weeks, Marcus became quietly obsessed with the light. Not in a frantic way, not in a way that disrupted his life or kept him awake with anxiety, just curious, drawn to it, the way you might be drawn to a half-remembered melody or a face in a crowd you think you recognize but can't quite place. He began to track it, not formally, not with charts or notes, just mentally. He would glance out his window at different times of the evening and take note. Was it on? When had it come on? Was it still on when he went to bed? The answer always was yes. The light appeared every evening, sometime between dusk and full dark, and it stayed on all night. He checked once at 2 in the morning, waking from a dream he couldn't remember, and there it was, glowing softly, patiently in the sleeping street. He checked again at 4:30, unable to fall back asleep, and it was still there. But when morning came, when the sky turned pale and the sun rose over the rooftops, and the street filled with the small sounds of the waking world, the light was gone. The window was dark. The house was empty again.
He walked past it one afternoon, deliberately, to get a closer look. The front gate was rusted, but not locked. He pushed it open, carefully, and stepped into the overgrown garden. The stones of the path were cracked and uneven, covered in moss. The air smelled like wet leaves and old wood. He walked up to the front door. It was painted dark green, faded and peeling. There was a small window set into it, covered on the inside by a lace curtain gone gray with age. He leaned close and tried to see through the gaps in the fabric. Darkness, just darkness. No shapes, no furniture, no sign that anyone had walked through those rooms in a very long time. He stepped back and looked up at the second-floor window, the one with the light. From here, in the daylight, it looked completely ordinary. Just a window, glass, frame, curtains, nothing unusual, nothing glowing, nothing waiting. He stood there for a long time, looking up, trying to understand what he was seeing, or what he wasn't seeing. And then he left.
That night, the light came on again. Part 3. The Quiet Truth. Marcus began to feel comforted by it. This surprised him. He had expected the opposite, that the mystery of the light would unsettle him, make him anxious, keep him awake with questions. But instead, over time, it became something else, a constant, a presence. Every night when he came home from work, tired and drained and carrying the small weight of the day on his shoulders, he would glance across the street as he walked up to his own front door, and the light would be there, or it would come on soon. And somehow that helped. It was like knowing someone else was awake, even if that someone was no one, even if the light had no explanation, no reason, no person behind it turning it on or off. It was still there, and that mattered. He stopped asking people about it. He stopped trying to solve it. He simply accepted it. Some nights, when he couldn't sleep, he would sit by his window in the dark and look at the light across the street. He would watch the way it glowed, soft and steady, never flickering, never dimming. He would imagine the room behind it, empty perhaps, dusty, furniture covered in white sheets, floorboards creaking softly under the weight of nothing. But the light was on, and somehow, in a way he couldn't explain and didn't need to, that made him feel less alone. He stopped asking people about it. He stopped trying to solve it. He simply accepted it. Some nights, when he couldn't sleep, he would sit by his window in the dark and look at the light across the street. He would watch the way it glowed, soft and steady, never flickering, never dimming. He would imagine the room behind it, empty perhaps, dusty, furniture covered in white sheets, floorboards creaking softly under the weight of nothing. But the light was on, and somehow, in a way he couldn't explain and didn't need to, that made him feel less alone. Winter came. The street grew colder. The trees lost their leaves. The nights grew longer and darker, and the light in the window burned earlier and earlier each evening. Marcus would come home in the blue twilight, and there it would be, already glowing, as if it had been waiting for him, as if it knew he would look for it, as if it was a message sent across the narrow street, through the cold air, through the dark. I am here. You are not alone. The night is long, but we will both make it through. One evening in late December, the power went out. A storm had rolled through the city, heavy and sudden, bringing wind and rain and the crackling pressure of lightning splitting the sky. The streetlights went dark. The houses up and down the block went dark. Marcus's own house went dark. He sat in the sudden blackness, listening to the rain hammer against the windows, and waited for his eyes to adjust. And then he looked across the street. The light was still on, not electric, not plugged into anything, not dependent on the grid or the storm or the physical rules that governed every other light on the street. Just on, glowing softly, steadily, impossibly in the dark window of the empty house. Marcus sat very still. He felt something in his chest loosen, some small knot of fear or confusion or need to understand that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. He let it go. The light was on. That was enough. Part 4. The Goodbye. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted. The trees began to bud. The days stretched out, longer and warmer, and the night came later and later. And one evening in early April, Marcus came home to find the light was not on. He stopped on the sidewalk and stared. The window was dark. He waited. The evening deepened. The sky went from blue to violet to deep velvet black. The streetlights came on. The stars appeared, faint and far away. The window stayed dark. He crossed the street. He didn't plan to. He didn't decide to. He just walked through the rusty gate, up the cracked stone path, to the front door of the house that had never been his, but had somehow, quietly, become part of his life. He stood there for a long time. The house felt different, stiller, more final, like something had finished, like something that had been holding on had finally, gently let go. Marcus put his hand on the door. It was cold. He closed his eyes and stood there in the dark, his palm flat against the old green wood, and he said, quietly, to no one and to everyone, "Thank you." He never saw the light again. The house stayed dark after that, month after month, season after season. Eventually, a family moved in, a young couple with a small child and a dog that barked at passing cars. They repaired the gate, tended the garden, painted the front door a cheerful yellow. And the window on the second floor, the one on the left, just above the door, it had curtains now, different ones. And sometimes a lamp was on, bright and modern and ordinary. But it wasn't the same. Marcus knew that. He didn't mind. Some things are not meant to last forever. Some things are only meant to be there when you need them, to hold a space, to glow softly in the dark, to say, without words, without reason, "You are not alone. I am here." And that is enough. Epilogue: The Memory. Sometimes, late at night, when Marcus couldn't sleep, he would look out his window at the house across the street, and he would remember the light, the soft, impossible, faithful light that had burned every night in an empty house for no reason he ever understood. He would remember the way it made him feel, safe, seen, held by something quiet and patient and kind. And he would close his eyes and think, somewhere, in some window, in some house, in some world I cannot see, the light is still on, and that is enough. History 2. Someone Who Was Always There. Part 1. The Familiar Stranger. The first time Sarah noticed them, she was 7 years old. It was autumn. She remembers that clearly. The smell of wood smoke in the air, the leaves turning gold and red and brown, the way the light slanted through her bedroom window in the late afternoon, making everything warm and slow and honey-colored. She was lying on her stomach on the floor, coloring in a book, and she looked up for no particular reason, and there was someone standing in the doorway. Not in the doorway exactly, just near it, at the edge of her vision, a shape, a presence, something that felt like a person, but when she turned her head to look directly, there was nothing there. She went back to coloring. The presence stayed. She could feel it. Not in a frightening way, not in a way that made her want to call for her mother or run from the room, just there, watching, perhaps, or simply being, existing in the same space, quietly, without explanation. She finished coloring the picture, a horse, she thinks, or maybe a house, the details are gone now, and got up and walked past the doorway and went downstairs for dinner. She didn't think about it again. Not then. But the presence came back. Not every day, not in any pattern she could track, just sometimes, in the corner of her eye, at the edge of a room, standing by the window while she did her homework, sitting at the foot of her bed while she read before sleep, walking behind her just out of sight when she moved through the house in the early morning quiet before anyone else woke. She never saw them clearly, she never heard them speak, but she knew they were there, and it felt normal. The way a shadow feels normal, the way the sound of the house settling at night feels normal, the way certain rooms feel warmer than others, or certain corners feel older, or certain moments feel like they've happened before, even though you know they haven't. She grew up with them. Part 2. The Unspoken Companion. When Sarah was 12, she asked her mother if she believed in ghosts. They were in the kitchen. Her mother was washing dishes, her hands moving through the warm, soapy water, and Sarah was drying, placing each clean plate carefully in the cupboard. Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Why do you ask?" she said. Sarah shrugged. She didn't know how to explain it. She didn't know if she should. "Just wondering," she said. Her mother smiled. "I think there are things we don't understand, things that exist in ways we can't quite see or explain, but that doesn't mean they're not real." Sarah dried another plate. "Do you think they're scary?" she asked. Her mother looked at her then, really looked at her, and Sarah saw something in her mother's eyes, recognition maybe, or memory, or the quiet understanding of someone who had also felt something she couldn't name. "No," her mother said softly, "I don't think they're scary. I think some of them are just with us, keeping us company." Sarah nodded. She didn't ask anything more, but she felt relieved. The presence followed her through adolescence, through high school, through college, through the small apartment she rented in her 20s, where the walls were thin and the radiator clanked, and the neighbors argued late into the night. The presence was there. In the chair by the window while she studied, in the hallway when she came home late from work, in the kitchen in the early morning, standing quietly near the counter while she made coffee, the first pale light of dawn coming through the blinds. She had stopped trying to see them. She had stopped wondering who they were, or why they were there, or what they wanted, because it had become clear over the years that they didn't want anything. They were just there, a constant, a companion, a quiet, steady presence that moved through her life the way breath moved through her body, invisible, essential, unquestioned.
Part 3. The Almost Seen. There were moments over the years when Sarah almost saw them. Not fully, not clearly, but almost. Once, in her 30s, she was standing in front of the mirror in her bathroom, brushing her teeth before bed, and she glanced up and saw in the reflection a figure standing behind her, just for a second, just a shape, tall, still, familiar in a way she couldn't name, and then it was gone. Her heart didn't race. She didn't gasp or spin around or feel the cold shock of fear. She just looked at the empty space where the figure had been and felt something warm and quiet settle in her chest. "Oh," she thought, "there you are." Another time, she was sitting on a park bench in the late afternoon, reading a book, and she felt someone sit down beside her. She didn't look up. She knew no one was there, or rather, she knew that if she looked, the bench would be empty. But she could feel them, the weight of them, the warmth, the way the air shifted slightly, the way it does when another person is near. She kept reading. The presence stayed, and for 20 minutes, maybe 30, they sat together in the golden autumn light, two beings in the same space, neither one needing to acknowledge the other, neither one needing to speak. It was enough. Part 4. The Acceptance. Sarah got married in her late 30s. A kind man, a good man, someone who laughed easily and listened carefully and loved her in a way that felt steady and real. She told him one night about the presence. They were lying in bed in the dark, the kind of dark that feels safe and close, and she said quietly, almost to herself, "There's someone with me. There always has been. I don't know who they are, but they're there." She waited for him to laugh, or to be concerned, or to suggest gently that she talk to someone about it. But he didn't. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Do they bother you?" "No," Sarah said. "Do you want them to leave?" She thought about that, really thought about it. "No," she said finally, "I don't." He reached over and took her hand. "Then it's okay," he said. And that was all. The presence stayed, through her marriage, through the birth of her daughter, through the years of late nights and early mornings, of scraped knees and bedtime stories, of laughter and exhaustion, and the slow, steady accumulation of a life lived well. The presence was there, in the corner of the nursery while she rocked her daughter to sleep, in the kitchen while she made breakfast, in the hallway at night when she checked, one last time, to make sure the doors were locked and the lights were off and everyone was safe. And sometimes, in those quiet moments, Sarah would pause. She would stand very still, and she would whisper, so softly that even she could barely hear it, "Thank you." Part 5. The Understanding. Sarah was 53 when she finally understood. She was sitting in her garden on a Sunday afternoon, alone, with a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. Her daughter was grown now, living in another city, building her own life. Her husband was inside, reading, the house quiet around them. The presence was there, standing near the fence, or sitting in the chair across from her, or simply existing in the way they always had, in the warm September air. And Sarah looked at the place where she knew they were, even though she couldn't see them, and she said out loud, "Who are you?" She didn't expect an answer. She had never gotten one before. But this time, she felt something. Not words, not a voice, just a sense, a knowing, a quiet communication that moved through her like warmth, like recognition, like coming home. The presence was not a ghost, not a spirit, not something separate from her. The presence was her, a part of her, the part that had always watched, the part that had always been steady and quiet and there, the part that had walked beside her through every moment of her life, holding space, bearing witness, never leaving, the part of her that was not afraid, the part of her that was never alone.
Sarah started to cry, not from sadness, not from fear, from relief, from understanding, from the deep, quiet knowledge that she had never been as fragmented as she thought, that all the parts of her, the seen and the unseen, the known and the unknown, the part that moved through the world and the part that watched, had always been together, had always been one. She sat in the garden and cried, and the presence sat with her, and they were the same. Epilogue. The Peace. After that, Sarah stopped calling it the presence. She stopped thinking of it as something other, something separate, something watching from the doorway. She understood now that it was just her, the quiet part, the part that didn't need to speak or be seen or be understood by anyone else, the part that simply was. And knowing that, really knowing it, deeply in the way you know things that don't need proof, changed everything. She felt less lonely, less scattered, less like she was trying to hold herself together with effort and will and constant vigilance, because she wasn't alone. She had never been alone. The part of her that watched was also the part of her that lived, and both were safe, both were whole, both were home.
Sometimes, late at night, Sarah still feels the presence. In the hallway, in the doorway, in the corner of her eye. But now, when she does, she smiles, and she thinks, "Hello, I see you. I am you, and we are safe. And so are you." You don't need to stay awake now. The stories have done their work. Your mind can rest, and the rain will stay with you long after my voice fades. Sleep peacefully. You are safe here, in the quiet of the night.